So for this 1 hour, 2 hours that we are here, try to focus. And we often hear brothers saying we are struggling to do my amals, I'm struggling to do this. Alhamdulillah, this is the good place to come then. So if a person is not practicing, it doesn't mean that you run away from these places. This is what shaitan wants you to do. Yeah, you feel embarrassed. I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. Well then come. Maybe the thirst will come back in you. That hunger that you had at the beginning when you came, it will come back. So this is we keep coming so that we may attain practice. And if you already practice doing the amals, alhamdulillah, keep on doing it. And mashallah, brilliant. And then bring others as well with you. So before the discourse begins, there's a naat will be played, and then after the naat, the discourse, and then it will be the Maghrib Salah, after which there will be brief 5 to 10 minutes masnoon azkars, which are the prophetic du'as and the supplications are recited from the Quran and Sunnah, and then after that will be the dhikr, and then inshallah after that will be Isha Salah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you in this world and the hereafter for your time and effort. Jazakallah. Is any brother would like to come forward and read a naat for us or recite anything from the Quran? Any of the youngsters sitting here? Any surah? Brother, come on, you. Come on, brother. This is great reward to you. Part of the. You'll be part of the blessed majlis as well as sitting there. So this is not the time to be shy. Come on, brothers. Actually, you've done your Qiraat competitions and Nasheed competitions. I've heard you all before, some of you youngsters. Need a mobile phone? Okay, then inshallah the brother, if we can invite him, Brother Suffian, listen and focus attentively to what they are about to say, and don't think because you are 10 or 15 that it doesn't apply to you. You have your life to live if you are going to live that long. So it's very important, because you have to still go through your school, colleges, university, work. You'll face many challenges and tests, obstacles in your youth.
ألهمني رشدي وأعذني من شر النفس. I'm going to begin today's bayan by asking everyone here some rhetorical questions. I'm going to ask some questions to which I don't want an answer for, I just want you to reflect and think. And eventually you will realize why. Imagine you come across a hadith. It's a single hadith, an authentic hadith, something our beloved, our master, the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, said just once in his life. Just think about it. You come across something he said once in his life, and you know it to be true. What does that mean to you? What value does it have in your heart? Something no one can deny that he said, what does it mean to you? Now ask yourself, if he said the same thing, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Now what does it mean? What significance does that have? What's the impact on your heart that he said something 3 times in a row? Now ask yourself, what if he said the same thing 3 times in the morning at Fajr time and 3 times in the evening at Maghrib time, daily? Now what does it mean? So hopefully you should be able to distinguish now between something he said once, a few times, on a daily basis. You should see the impact it has, the weight it carries, the wazn it has on the heart, and the importance of it. The reason I say that because many of you here, you use this book. It's a fantastic book full of many lessons, many supplications that will only benefit you. But how many of you actually read the translation? How many of you actually reflect as to what's in this book? You see, I began this bayan with just one supplication, one prophetic supplication that is recited 3 times at Fajr time and 3 times at Maghrib. Those that don't have a copy of this book, I highly recommend you get a copy. It's only a few pounds, and perhaps we have it here today in the Zawiya. I'll read this supplication again, and those that I read it on a daily basis, you will recognize this, and perhaps you know it by heart. It's narrated by Sayyidina Imran ibn Hussein radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. He said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught my father 2 statements to recite this dua, and the dua goes as such: Allahumma alhimni rushdi wa idni min shari nafs. I'm not going to give you the translation just yet, because this prophetic supplication identifies the greatest enemy you'll ever face in your life. It doesn't matter of your gender, doesn't matter of your age. We all have one enemy, at least one. Some have many more. But the greatest enemy of all time. This enemy is here today in this room with us. For those watching online, he's there with you right now. He's always been there, and he's never going to go. Not until we die. This enemy is bigger than any army you'll ever face. It's bigger than the devil himself. This enemy is the Nafs, the ego. So I asked you at the beginning to think about this. Why is this supplication suggested to be read 3 times every single day? Clearly it has a value behind it. And we know everything our beloved, our Master Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said was from revelation. He never spoke from himself. Everything he said was the truth. Everything he said had weight behind it. It had a purpose. It had a benefit for you and me. The reason why I say this enemy is bigger than the devil himself, because prior to the event involving Iblis and Hazrat Adam alayhi salam, our Mashaykh have taught us that previously he used to worship Allah Ta'ala. He was a devout worshipper. In fact, he was such a devout worshipper, he spent, I think it was 70,000 years in worship. 70,000 years. That's something we'll never do. Not only that, but they also teach us that there's not a single place on planet Earth that he did not bow down his head in prostration. Not a single piece of land on this planet that he did not worship his Lord. We also know that he used to spend time with some of the angels. That's how high status was. So like I said, there was a period of time where he was in obedience. There was a period of time where he worshipped his Lord. But let's just fast forward to the incident between him and Hazrat Adam alayhi salam. We all know this story, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But we know he was commanded to bow down to the Prophet Adam alayhi salam, to which he refused. Why? His ego. His ego got in the way. of fulfilling the command of Allah Ta'ala. His ego said to him, look at him, he's made of clay, he's made of soil, I'm made of fire. Why should I bow to him? Who's he and who am I? I've been worshipping for so long. I'm made of a higher element, I'm made of fire. He's made of clay, he's made of topsoil. Why should I bow to him? So we know this was a pivotal moment in his life, and everything changed from there on. The reason why I'm going to talk about the greatest enemy, i.e. the Nafs, because the Nafs, the ego, is the root of so many vices. It's the root of so many evils, so many characteristic flaws and problems in people's lives. You see, as Muslims, we are people of depth. We are people of understanding. We don't just treat superficial problems when they arise, and then another one arises, and then another one, and so forth. No. The ego is like a weed. Now, for those of a garden or have done any gardening, you know to get rid of the weed, you don't just cut the leaves, it will grow back. You don't even cut the stem, it will grow back. To get rid of the weed, you get rid of the root. You have to dig deep down and get the root and then extract it. That's the best way of getting rid of the weed. See, the ancient Greeks, they had a certain wisdom behind them, the likes of Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, etc. Their physicians, their doctors, they used to treat the root problem of any illness. When someone was ill, they would look at the root problem of that illness, rather than just treating the superficial symptoms as they do in today's hospitals. They looked at the root problem and dealt with that. You deal with the root, all the problems are solved. So I'm now going to just discuss a few signs that a person is egotistic, or that ego takes over them sometimes and influences how they behave, how they speak, how they deal with others. Signs such as jealousy, being jealous of one another. Unfortunately, nowadays, it's prevalent in society. People get jealous of another person's new car, another person's house, another person's wife or husband. Anything, job, career, status, knowledge. Jealousy is everywhere, unfortunately. But what's jealousy in reality? You see, Imam Haddad, the master of the science of purification, of self-purification, he defined jealousy as the disagreement of the distribution of Allah's treasures. I'll say that again. Imam Haddad defined jealousy as the disagreement of the distribution of Allah's treasures. Now we know whether good or bad, Allah Ta'ala is the one who provides. Whether you're a millionaire or a pauper, He provides. He provides for what you eat, what you spend, etc. He's the one that decides ultimately what you get, your risk. So if a person, if they're successful, materialistically, let's say, you should not be jealous because Allah Ta'ala has decided for that person to be financially successful at that moment in time. Perhaps you two, let's say, work equally hard, you're equally patient, but you don't come out with the same results. Who's the decider? Who's the provider? Of course, it's Allah Ta'ala, we know that. So that's why never be jealous, because you don't really know the significance of the other person being successful then and not you. You don't know the blessings behind it, you don't know the reasons behind it. And it's not for us to even ask. You do your best, you earn lawfully, spend lawfully, fine, alhamdulillah. What happens after that is out of your control. After jealousy, how about envy? Envy. Some people confuse the two, and I can understand why. In a nutshell, what's envy? Anyone answer the question, please? What's your understanding of envy? Or perhaps give me an example. Okay, in a nutshell, envy could be perceived as not wanting what someone else has, even though you can never get it yourself. Not wanting what someone else has, even though you'll never get it yourself. That's why it's worse than jealousy. At least with jealousy, you say, okay, he's got £1 million, he shouldn't have it, but I should. So at least £1 million is going to go somewhere. But envy is even worse. You're saying, why should he be a millionaire? I don't want to be a millionaire, but he shouldn't have it as well. It's even worse. There are different levels of envy, which I won't go into today because it's not the topic of discussion. Soren Kierkegaard is a famous Danish philosopher. He said regarding envy, he said, people would admit to the most felonious crimes than ever admitting to being envious. He said, people will admit to the most felonious crimes, but they will never admit to being envious. You'll never find anyone who will honestly say, I envy such a person, or I envy you. They will never say it. That's the nature of envy. It's such a sick disease of the heart. It's very, very rare you'll find, and I've never come across anyone who's seriously admitted to being envious. Even though you might see it with your eyes, you will see a person being jealous of another. But when it comes to envy, people will never admit to it. It's such a sick disease. How about self-pride? Self-pride and vanity. We live in an era where people take selfies, put it on social media to get as many likes as possible. Self-pride, thinking better than you really are. You only have to walk down the road to see people walking like 10 men thinking they're better than they really are. I don't know what people think of themselves. Vanity, showing off, being vain. So many things nowadays are vanity orientated. Jobs, status, knowledge, even religion. Not religion as such, but religious knowledge, shall we say. Health and fitness. Now, on a previous bayan, I mentioned an example. There was a person in the masjid on his own reading namaz. And, mashallah, he was quite knowledgeable. He was reading with the correct tajweed, reading with the correct outward form. And there was no one with him until he heard the door closing behind him halfway through his prayer. So what did he do? He began to improve his tajweed even more. He began to improve his whole prayer even more. Because he's thinking, someone's walked in, they're going to see me. And this is where the ego kicks in. So he started off okay, he was reading, alhamdulillah, quite well. And then he heard someone come in, but he couldn't see who it was. So then he even improved further his namaz. Then when he finished, he thought he'd turn around and see who just watched me read namaz. He turned around and it was a dog. Now, whether the story is true or not, it's irrelevant. There's this very good point behind it. During that person's namaz, his ego kicked in. His nafs kicked in, told him to, you know what, make it tajweed even better. Improve your namaz even better because someone's watching me. But then at that point, you have to ask yourself, who are you worshipping? Your Lord or your ego? Who are you trying to please? Who are you trying to look at good in front of? Allah Ta'ala or someone else? There's another example, again, whether it's true or not is irrelevant. There's a person, say, sat in the masjid, and there's a group of people sat nearby. And this person's minding his business, he's probably doing tasbih, I don't know. And the people are saying, mashallah, look at this brother. Every time he comes, reads Jamaat 5 times a day in the masjid. He's always the first one here, he's the last one to leave. And when he's not praying, he's doing tajweed or not tajweed talawat, he's doing tasbih or muraqabah. He's always in a state of worship. And they're bigging this guy up, and he sat there and he's listening in. And then at that point, when they stop, he goes, sorry brothers, by the way, I'm also fasting. Again, example of the nafs. So they're just two examples how religion or religious people do outwardly practices for the wrong reasons. And I mentioned health and fitness. Health and fitness, if you go back 20, 30 years ago, for those that are old enough, you know there weren't many gyms around. Health and fitness, exercising was purely about becoming fitter, improving your heart rate, reducing the cholesterol levels. It wasn't like now where it's all about getting the beach body, getting a six-pack. These things are all vain. So many things are to do with looking good in front of people. In fact, I saw one person, I was looking up some nutritional advice on YouTube, and there's a guy exercising in the gym. And mashallah, you can tell he looks after himself, he exercises, eats the right things, which is fine. And he's there exercising, lifting weights with a dumbbell. And he's doing it, and I'm listening because I'm trying to understand what he's talking about. And he says, yeah, you know what they say nowadays? Curls for the girls. So he's there doing arm curls for the biceps, and this is what comes out. Ask yourself, what are you exercising for? Is it to show off? And unfortunately, this is a sickness amongst the Muslims as well. They take the shirt off, do a selfie, put it on Facebook, get some likes. What are you doing? Who are you trying to impress? Put your shirt back on. Anyway, so these are signs that you will see in other people, maybe not in yourself, but if you reflect, perhaps you will see it in yourself. And it's something to work on. Because the root of all these vices that I've just talked about is the nafs, it's the ego. Now let's look at some symptoms. Symptoms you can't always see, you have to reflect. And only you know whether this applies to you or not. It's not for me to say, it's not for anyone else to say, it's only you know this. One of the symptoms is arrogance. Arrogant people. Now, arrogance is a strange phenomenon. You see, arrogant people don't know they're arrogant. They really don't. They just think they're better than others. That's what's going on in their head. Really. Perhaps they're very wealthy, perhaps they're physically better than you. Either way, they don't see themselves as arrogant, they just think they're better than you. And the funny thing is, you put two arrogant people together and just stand back and watch. Eventually, one arrogant person will dislike the other one. He'll see the arrogance in the next person, but not in themselves. So a very strange phenomenon, arrogance. But like I said, they don't know that they're being arrogant, they just think they're better. That's it. This is a symptom. Another one is, unfortunately nowadays, people can't take advice. They can't take criticisms. And maybe at work, you have to take criticism because your manager is your manager and you're being paid to take advice, so you have to listen to him. Outside of work, different story. People get offended way too easily. If someone gives you advice, it's actually a good thing. Being criticized is not a bad thing. In fact, Imam Malik was once asked by a person, he was asked, how did you perfect your character? He said, how did you perfect your character? And this is one of the greatest imams that we know, who after so many hundreds of years, his name is still known around the world. He was asked, how did you perfect your character? Do you know what he said? He replied, I took my critics seriously. I took my critics seriously. He never once said, I'm the great imam. Who are you to criticize me? What do you know compared to me? As knowledgeable as he was, as great as he was never once offended by criticism. He took it as an opportunity to improve himself. He took it as an opportunity to become a better human. He took it as an opportunity to become that much closer to Allah Ta'ala. Because if someone can see his mistake, he worked on his mistakes. And that's how he perfected his character. And that's the mentality we should try to adopt. Someone criticizes you, as long as it's justified and, done within reason. I'm not saying go out and start criticizing everyone and say, oh no, brother, you should be listening to me, you should take advice. No. If you're going to criticize, do it in a constructive manner. Do it in a manner our beloved Master ﷺ used to advise people. For example, the person that came into Masjid al-Nabi once and he began to urinate in the corner. The person didn't know any better. He wasn't trying to be rude or disrespectful. He didn't know. Some of the Sahaba obviously became very angry. They were prepared to kill him. What did our beloved Master ﷺ do? Does anyone know? He didn't start mocking him. He didn't tell him off. He went over and he physically veiled him. He got a cloth and veiled this person. He hid his mistake from others. That's compassion for you. That's compassion upon creation. He hid this person's fault. He would rather veil him. He took him to the side afterwards and explained to him in the most beautiful of manners. He said, brother, this is a masjid, this is a place of worship, we don't do this here, and so forth. And the person wasn't offended. He took the advice and he became a better person after that. Also, unfortunately, not just in this day and age, for a long time now, people don't like taking advice of younger people, youngsters in particular, children. The elders, not necessarily elders, even people like myself who work with children day in, day out as a teacher, you have to understand that even children have wisdom. Even the children sat here today, they have wisdom that I don't have, perhaps you don't have. Think back to the time when the Prophet ﷺ put Osama ibn Zayd in command of an army. A 17-year-old boy in charge of an army. Not just a soldier, Not a lieutenant, not a captain, the general, in charge of hundreds of lives that were in his hand. A 17-year-old boy. Now imagine if you, as a 17-year-old boy, I don't know if you have any teenagers here in college, imagine if they were put in charge of your life. Would you listen to them? Would you do as they say? If so, what's stopping you? It's the nafs, it's the ego. The ego's telling you, who's he to talk to me? He's a little kid. What does he know? What has he achieved that I haven't achieved? He hasn't even got his A-levels. I apologise to anyone here who is 17 or 18 and got A-levels. But just think, it's something to really reflect upon. Because there are people out there, youngsters, who are very intellectual, not just in the deen, but on worldly matters as well. They know what they're doing. So don't immediately knock people off because of their age. And vice versa for people older than us. The old people in our communities, older people in our societies, don't knock them off. Don't discard them and think, what do they know? So these are some of the symptoms of the ego, of the nafs. We looked at signs, we looked at symptoms, and we identified the enemy. Now, perhaps you're telling yourself, well, none of that applies to me. I'm not jealous. I'm not envious. I'm certainly not vain. I don't show off. It doesn't apply to me. But see, this is the whole point of this bayan, because the ego is such a clever enemy, it will trick you into thinking it doesn't apply to you. See, the Prophet ﷺ, he himself said, your worst enemy is your ego, which is between your flanks. He himself said to all of us, your worst enemy is your ego, which is between your flanks. He also said, beware of the ego and trust not its mischief. You see, all the great masters of science of self-purification, they knew how to deal with this enemy. They knew how to conquer the ego. They knew how to dominate it and keep it under control. That's why we know their names today. Well, one of the reasons. Because Hazrat Jalaluddin Rumi, rahimahullah, he had a very famous saying. He said, the ego is a veil between you and your Lord. The ego is a veil between you and your Lord. What's a veil? It's a barrier. It's a barrier. It stops you from coming close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if your whole purpose, if you are aware that your whole purpose in life is to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to get His pleasure, gain His favours, you have to overcome the ego. There's no ifs or buts. You have to. You have to dominate the ego. And it's not easy. It's a challenging task to admit that, yes, I have an ego, and we all have an ego. No one can deny it. So perhaps those signs and symptoms that I mentioned, that they may not apply to you all the time. But if you want to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, take those words seriously. And I'm also going to give you, before we finish, some practical strategies. Some have been told by Hazrat Sahib already in previous bayans. Perhaps others you have not heard, I don't know. Either way, they are good reminders. And you were told every time you come to these Monday majlises, even if you know what's being said, still take it in, revise it, memorize it. Perhaps you haven't heard it the same way as before. Because the ego will tell you, I know that already, why do I need to listen? The nafs will tell you, I don't need to listen to that person. What does he know? Look at his age. He's a nobody. Like any enemy, you have to declare war on the enemy. Sun Tzu, the author of The Art of War, once said, don't depend on the enemy not coming. Depend rather on being ready on him. He said, don't depend on the enemy not coming. Depend rather on being ready on him. So even if you think all those signs and symptoms don't apply to you, be ready anyway. Because the day will come when the nafs will want to take over. It will want to influence what you say. It will influence what you do. It will influence how you behave. It will influence your relationships with your family. It will influence your social relationships. It will affect how you work. It affects how you treat your colleagues. It affects how you portray your religion in public. One strategy we can all do is just being able to say, I don't know. Just say, I don't know. What I mean by that is if someone asks you a question, whether it's regarding the deen or anything really. If you really don't know, just say I don't know. Don't think the other person's going to think less of you. Don't ever think this. Don't ever think you're going to lose face by saying I don't know. On a previous bayan, Hazrat Ustaad mentioned a person once came from a far distant land to Imam Malik, and he came with a variety of questions from his people to ask the great Imam. And I think, if I can remember, I think it was about 30 questions, 30 in total, to which only 13 the great Imam gave answers for, the rest of which he said, I don't know. And this is the great Imam Malik, rahimahullah. He never once thought, or he never once let his ego tell him, just give a wishy-washy answer or say, in my opinion, I think it's this. No, if he wasn't certain, he wouldn't say, he just said, I don't know. He wasn't concerned about losing face. He wasn't concerned about being appearing disrespectful or like a nobody. And the other person was actually surprised. He said, you're the great Imam, how come you don't know? It didn't faze him. You know, today you might hear people say, well, in my humble opinion, I think such and such a thing. I think it was Ibn Rushd who said, a person who sees his own humility has become arrogant. If you see your own humility, if you think you're humble, you've actually just become arrogant. Look at the wisdom behind that. So don't be afraid of ever saying, I don't know, because this, according to Imam Abu Hanifa in his book, Fiqh al-Akbar, he said this is half of faith. Just being able to admit that you don't know, that's fine, just say it. Don't take the risk of giving an incorrect answer, especially with regards to the deen. I think it was Imam Shafi'i who, prior to participating in any civil discourse, prior to engaging anyone in a debate, what would he do? He would do dua that the truth come out the other person's lips. He wasn't concerned about himself. He wasn't concerned how he looked in front of people. He would rather lose a debate, but the truth be manifest. And there's a person without an ego. There's a person who has dominated his ego, so it never affected him. So, I mentioned Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i. There are many other examples, but they're just two for now. Two of the great Imams. Hazrat Ali, radiallahu anhu, he was given the title the Chosen One. That was his title. Once he stood at the pulpit and a person asked him a question, to which he replied, I don't know. Again, he had dominated his ego. His ego never affected how he behaved with people, how he spoke. He honestly didn't know, so he said, look, I don't know. This person was surprised. He said, how did you get to the pulpit if you don't know this answer? What did he say in reply? He said, I got to this pulpit because of my knowledge. I ascended this pulpit because of my knowledge. If I was to ascend based on my ignorance, I would have reached the heavens. He said to the person, I got to this pulpit, I got to where I am now because of my knowledge, but if I was to be judged upon how much I don't know, I would have got to the heavens. What does that say? What does that say about the intellect of humans? We really don't know much at all. No matter how qualified you are, no matter if you've got a master's, a PhD, doesn't matter how clever you may be, really we'd be given only a little bit of knowledge. So never think you know everything about your specialty, whether it's to do with your studies, your work, the deen, anything. This is the great Imam Ali radiallahu anhu. He said, I don't know. He wasn't afraid of using these words. How about Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu? Does anyone know his title? Does anyone know his title? Like for Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he was given the title the most truthful. Hazrat Uthman ibn Affan was given the title the possessor of two lights. Does anyone know the title of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu? I was hoping some brothers, hey, study with me, you should know this. You should have been revising this week for your exams. Anyway, he was given the title the differentiator. The differentiator. Why? Because he could always differentiate between good from evil, He could always differentiate between truth from falsehood. He could always differentiate between right from wrong, and he did that with excellence. He did it with excellence. He couldn't be flawed on this. I'll give you an example. Once there was an incident between a Jew and a hypocrite, and they couldn't resolve this issue, so they took the matter to the Prophet ﷺ to resolve the issue. So the situation was explained, and eventually the decision was in the favor of the Jew. Our Prophet ﷺ took the side of the Jew because that's where the truth was. And he always went with the person who was truth, where the truth was. He didn't look at tribe, he didn't look at religion. The truth was with the Jew in this particular case, he went with the Jew. Now this hypocrite was still displeased. He wasn't satisfied with the ruling or the outcome. So he said to the Jew, listen, let's now go to Hazrat Umar, let's see what he has to say about this. Now the Jew was surprised. He thought, hold on, we've been to your Prophet and he's taking my side, and yet you want to go to someone else? So he said, okay, let's go, man, let's just go. So they went to Hazrat Umar, and the Jew said to him, listen, we've just been to your messenger, we've just been to him. He's already resolved this issue. He's even taken my side. And Hazrat Umar, he asked the hypocrite, is this true? To which he replied, yes, this is true. So he said, just wait here, I'll be right back. So he went away, came back with his sword, and he beheaded the hypocrite. He took his head off. He said, this is my ruling for those that are not satisfied with the decision of Allah and His Messenger. At no point did his ego take over and say, wow, I'm honoured, you've come to me for advice. You come to me after the Messenger ﷺ. You came to me. I must be something. I must be someone important. No. He saw, how dare he be discontent with the ruling of my beloved Messenger ﷺ. Who is better than him? Who am I compared to him? I'm a nobody. See, these are purified people walking around who dominated their ego. They dominated their nafs. They never let their nafs influence them. So, like an enemy, like I said, you have to declare war on this enemy, on the ego, the nafs. There's no compromise. There's no middle ground with the ego. It's everything or nothing. Because the ego is such that it will affect your prayer. It will affect your daily worship. It might affect the people going on pilgrimage at this moment in time. I don't know. The possibility is there, though. The ego is very clever. So much so that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said, the ego is worse than 70 devils. Not worse than the devil, worse than 70 devils. Now, don't take it literally where it's equal to 70 devils. No. In the Arabic language, we know 70 has a metaphorical meaning. There's an implication behind it. It means really it's infinite. Like perhaps you heard the saying, if you see your brother doing something wrong, make 70 excuses for him. You may have heard this before. What they mean is you don't go to 69 excuses and then say in the 70th one, oh, look, you committed a sin. No, it means really there's an infinite number of excuses for your brother. In the same way, you can understand the ego was worse than 70 devils. It's a much bigger problem than the shaitan himself. It's such a big problem that, like I said, the shaitan, Iblis, could not control his own ego. Even he couldn't do it. He didn't have the strength to do so. Yet the Sahaba did, with the right training. All the Sahaba did. All the great masters of the science of self-purification dominated their ego through hard work, through training, through patience, through effort, through himmah, through sabr. And we can do the same. So at the end of the bayan, when the brother announces the course of self-purification, there's one opportunity, an easy opportunity, to go on the path of purifying yourself, dominating your ego, understand how it works, understand how to control it, understand how to override it when the time is right. Another strategy I actually took from a couple of my friends who, they are the martial art instructors and they're very well renowned around the world. And what they teach their students in the martial arts dojo or gym, what you call it, they said to the students, they said, look, you're good. You're a black belt, you've worked hard, you've achieved so much. But never forget there's someone out there better than you. There's always someone out there better than you. But you know what? If you keep yourself to yourself and don't show off, you'll never have to face them. What can you learn from that? Now, I've just used the martial arts as an example. However, if you're a student, you could be a taxi driver, a doctor, I don't care what you do in your life, always tell yourself there's someone out there better than you at what you do. You just haven't come across them yet, perhaps. So that's one way of keeping your ego in check. That's one way of telling yourself, you know what, I'm okay at what I do, but I'm not all that. I've got no reason to show off. Another strategy to use, I'm going to take from Hazrat Saab, who said in a previous bayan, I can't recall the wali at this moment in time, but he was approached by one of his students, and the student asked the master, how did you get to where you are? How did you get to your maqam? How did you become who you are? So the master took the student and he took him out, took him for a walk into the marketplace. They walked around and eventually they returned. Now, until then, the master didn't say anything. He just walked with him. When he returned, he said to the student, everyone we saw on my journey, everyone in the marketplace, I told myself, they're better than me. He said to the student, everyone that you saw and I saw, I told myself they are better than me. Whether it was a man, a woman, a child, a tradesman, a consumer, he told himself they are better than me. He didn't see himself as some great wali of Allah. He didn't see himself as something spectacular. No, he said, I told myself they're better than me. So if you can understand that and apply that to yourself, it doesn't matter who is outside, always tell yourself they're better than you. That will help you keep your ego in check. So the first two you can do quite easily. You can do on your own time, when you're at home, at work, anywhere. The third strategy is to actually study under a teacher, study under a qualified teacher. Now I'm talking about the deen in particular because that's what we're here for. Because you see, unfortunately in this day and age, there's a sickness where people, they turn to a website here or a pamphlet there, and then all of a sudden they're giving fatwas out and rulings, but they've never even studied. Forget that. Come to the Zawiyah, learn from the teacher, learn something. Learn something worth learning. Because if you think you can elevate your status, elevate yourself, become knowledgeable without a teacher, you're kidding yourself. Now, I'm a high school teacher. Now, everyone here, well, most of us, no offense, probably you've done your GCSEs or any similar qualifications. Ask yourself, could you have done those GCSEs without a teacher in school? Could you have got your maths GCSE, your science GCSE without a teacher? No. Not unless you're a genius, but I'm speaking generally. So if something so simple as a GCSE you cannot achieve without a teacher, how can you understand something as intricate and complex and rich as the deen? You can't do it. So if you think you don't need a teacher, think back to all the great imams of our great faith. Look at all the great personalities. They all had a teacher. Even the Prophet ﷺ had a teacher. Angel Jibreel alayhi salam. Even though the student was greater than the teacher, he was teaching us, look, I'm learning from a teacher. So who are we to say we don't need a teacher to learn this deen? Going back to the example I used with Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, he said, he admitted that he didn't know much at all. Now, ask yourself, how many majlises have you been to where Hazrat Sahaba says something and it blows you away? It's just fascinating. You think, you know, why did I think of that? Or I never looked at it that way. Or wow, that's actually really simple. I never thought of that. Every day is a school day, as they say. You learn something every day. So, if you're serious about going forward, if you're serious about really achieving your potential, study under a teacher. And we're quite fortunate at the Zawiyah here in Hyde, Bolton, Oldham, and other places around the northwest, even around the country, we have courses going on. Go sit under a teacher and go sit with them, spend time with them. That in itself will teach you how to control your ego. The fact that you sat with someone, you're admitting, I don't know anything, please teach me. And one thing the teacher will give you that books will never give you. Now listen to this. I learned this many years ago from a bayan from Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. One thing the teacher will give you that a book will never give you is their experience. You can never get the experience. You need a real life person there to tell you. Now those that have spent time with Hazrat Saab, you know what I'm talking about. You know those times you spent with him are precious. You're the fortunate ones. And the last strategy I want to just quickly remind you of is the course of self-purification we have here. Because that is one of the first steps for you to dominate in your ego, controlling your nafs. Can I just have a raise of hands for those people that have either done the course or are currently on the course? Can I just have a quick raise of hands, please? Right, so a few of us. If you haven't done this course or you never even thought about it, go speak to one of the brothers here. Ask them, what's their experience been on this course? How has it improved them as a human? How has it improved their family relations? How has it improved them in their society, in their work? Because the whole purpose of this course is the first organ you have to work on is the tongue. Now, from my experience, that was the hardest organ to control, the tongue. Because once you learn how to control the tongue and use it for what it's used for, you're not really going to show off again. You're not going to speak to people disrespectfully. You're not going to be arrogant around people. So if you've not done this course, I highly recommend, from my experience, try this course. It won't cost you a penny. There's no hidden dotted line to sign. We don't want your bank details. No, completely free. All it requires is some effort from you, some patience, and I guarantee you will really benefit from it. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
MashaAllah, the ball now is in our court, is in your court. There is a course of self-purification known as Tariqa Muhammadiyah, which is taught at this centre and the various centres which the brother mentioned, where gradually you will be taught how to control and fight this ego, this nafs. So for 10 to 15 minutes after the dhikr, maybe before or after Isha, a brother will sit here at the front and he will go through what this course is about and how you will start off with your organs, your mind, and then the disease of the heart, and then inshallah enlightenment. So brothers who have not started on the journey of the course would like to know more, inshallah a person will sit at the front. Also, some announcements. Our teacher are constantly on the move. As you know, they are visiting various cities, not just in the UK, but internationally as well. There is going to be a visit to the City of the Saints, which is in Fez in Morocco. They'll be embarking on the journey from the 6th to the 13th of September. If you would like to go, then see Brother Waqas or Brother Farouk. And if you're unable to go, mashallah, sometimes we like to go, but you might be going to school now or college, then most of the journey that they are on are posted on Facebook, and most of them have social media Facebook pages. So try to like their page, Sheikh Ahmed Dabbagh, and then not only study it yourself, but try to share it with others, your own friends and family in the UK and Pakistan, and especially if they go to a country where you know somebody, make sure that you tag them in and you share it with them so that they can maybe participate in some of their gatherings, whichever country they're in. It's the least we can do. It is dawah, but whatever level you are going to be doing dawah as well. Some other announcements as well. There's some national events. On the 3rd of September, which is on Sunday, there's going to be an annual Jamia Muhammadiyah Islamic Sciences graduation ceremony. So mashallah, the sisters and brothers as well who have been doing the Jamia Muhammadiyah courses, they're going to be having a graduation ceremony. So the cost is £10 per ticket, and there'll be £20 on the door. It is recommended that you go with your families to encourage our sisters and our brothers who are studying the Alima courses, part-time, full-time, and maybe you can see the rewards and benefits. So maybe you can encourage your mothers, your sisters, maybe yourselves, go on these courses, and then the knowledge side, the further knowledge side, if you're lacking in that, is an opportunity to learn that. So this will be taking place on the 3rd, Sunday the 3rd of September. Brother Nuralim, who is the contact person for that? Brother Mazhar or Raja Saab here, you can contact and see them now, inshallah, if you would like to go. And finally, tips and advice at your fingertips. There is a public WhatsApp group called Ibriz for anyone who would like a qualified answer to your questions regarding Deen. So if you would like to be put on this WhatsApp page, see Brother Shabir Hassan regarding any Islamic questions that you have regarding Aqidah, Fiqh, or any of the Islamic sciences regarding your work, do's and don'ts. There is a WhatsApp page created especially for this, so you don't have to see the teacher regarding this, but this is a specific page. See Brother Shabir Hassan, or if you don't know who he is, I can give you his contact details. Alhamdulillah, that Jazakallah khair, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for coming again. And now we are going to break for Maghrib Salah, and then after that there will be Masnood Azkars, which is like protection, but there's recited from this book. Actually, if a person reads from this Maghrib time, imagine you're being protected till Fajr. And if you recite these Masnoon Azkars at Fajr time, you're protected till Maghrib. And this is the best cure from any attacks from Shayateen. In Bolton. Okay. I'll mention this anyway, but I recommend to do this on the day. But in Bolton, there are brothers who are going to be going on Gasht, which is door to door, knocking and calling people to dawah. This is actually the best form, one of the best forms of doing dawah as well. And the Sunnah way is knocking on doors. This is actually physically going on the footsteps of the prophets and messengers, knocking on people's doors and inviting them towards Deen. So in Tuesday in Medina Masjid, 6 o'clock, brothers will be leaving the masjid and inviting the locality. So brothers are recommended to participate in that. See Shabir Hassan for more information. Jazakallah khair.